6 months before the 9/11 attacks, the World Trade Center was purchased by the Silverstein Group. I guess by that name, you might know that Mr. Silverstein might claim to be Jewish. But he bought the World Trade Center for $3.2 billion, even though the building, when it was built full of asbestos, and it would take darn near that amount of money to destroy the building and clean it. Larry Silverstein took out insurance coverage on the property, which fortuitously covered acts of terrorism. The total potential payout is $4.6 billion, and Mr. Silverstein has been paid. The result of a court ruling, Silverstein makes a huge profit off of the 9/11 attacks. And if you follow the money, you'll begin to see the synagogue of Satan at work. Now, George W. Bush's brother was a director, and his cousin was the CEO of the security firm responsible for the electronic security network of the World Trade Center prior to and during 9/11. At least one security guard at the World Trade Center reported the abrupt removal of explosive sniffing dogs 5 days prior to 9/11. Isn't that interesting? Let's go on. No steel-framed building before or since 9/11 has ever collapsed due to fire. The World Trade Center buildings were designed to withstand the impact of airlines because they were at that time the tallest buildings in the world. The melting point of steel is about 2,700 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature of jet fuel fires does not exceed 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. So the buildings cannot have collapsed due to heat from the fires. Why were people seen in the gaps left by the plane impacts if the heat from the fires behind them was so excessive? Listen, why were there two distinct spikes, one for each tower, seen in seismic records before the towers collapsed? How could the World Trade Center towers collapse in free fall speed? Only 11 seconds World Trade Center 1 and 9 seconds for World Trade Center 2, speeds that approximate that of a ball dropped from similar height with no air resistance. Why did so many people, including the New York Fire Department, report hearing many explosions at street level prior to the towers falling? Who were those men on top of a van with a tripod and camera across the Hudson River filming the towers before the first plane hit? How did they know to be there? And why were they celebrating? The police arrested them and let them go into Israeli custody. Why? Now, building number 7, a 47-story skyscraper and part of the World Trade Center complex was not struck by a plane, but it collapsed in 6.5 seconds at 5:20 p.m. on September the 11th in the exact manner of a controlled demolition. Why was the U.S. military explosive thermate found in the dust of the World Trade Centers? Now you might say, well, all right, let's see if our government lies and does things and takes innocent life for other purposes. This is the end of my lecture today. Did you know that the United States wanted control over Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam? So President William McKinley lied about an explosion on board the USS Maine anchored in Havana Harbor that killed 260 American servicemen. They said Spain did it, but they offered no evidence. And because of that war, the Spanish-American War, the U.S. gained control over Cuba and the Philippines and Puerto Rico, Cuba in particular, so that the island could be open to United Fruit Company and other American corporations. Did Lyndon Baines Johnson lie to get us into a major war in Vietnam? The official story was that the North Vietnamese torpedo boats launched an unprovoked attack against a U.S. destroyer on routine patrol in the Tonkin Gulf on August 2nd, 1964, and that the communists followed up with a deliberate attack 2 days later. None of this was true. President Lyndon Baines Johnson used the fabricated incident to justify a momentous escalation in the war, ultimately leading to over 56,000 American deaths and millions of Vietnamese casualties. Now, when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was the president, Castro was in power in Cuba, and they wanted to invade Cuba. Did you know that there was a memo from the Pentagon to the president? We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area, in other Florida cities, and even in Washington. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay, the American military base in Cuba, and blame Cuba. Casualty lists in U.S. newspapers would cause a helpful wave of national indignation. Later, the Pentagon even suggested attacking Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago and making it look as if the Cubans were responsible, hoping this might force Britain into a war on Fidel Castro. This is America. They don't care nothing about human life when it stands in the way of a political and economic objective. Now, brothers and sisters, you know there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. But look how many Americans, black, brown, and white, have lost their lives on the basis of a lie.